The Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, and the police are not accepting the responsibility they should accept for the failings here. One blames one and the other blames the other.
And that's the issue, isn't it? Because Alison Saunders, the Director of Public Prosecutions, has been criticised over this. But you think that fundamentally this is her fault. It's happening on her watch. Decisions are being made to bring cases where there isn't sufficient evidence for anyone to think that a crime has even taken place, let alone the requirement for the CPS, of course, is more than a 50% chance of a jury finding someone guilty.
The whole point of the CPS is to prosecute someone when they think the evidence suggests they'll be found guilty on the balance of probabilities. Now, one of three things is happening in all of these cases. Either the Crown Prosecution Service is incompetent and failing to look at the evidence or ask the police for the evidence that they're being told by the defence team does exist, or they're being fraudulent and they know the evidence exists, but under the instruction of Alison Saunders, they are not pursuing the evidence because they really want that conviction, or they're being bullied, in my case, by a former senior member of the Crown Prosecution Service who was paid to bully them into prosecution by my accuser. So
your accuser's parents,
yeah.
Yes.
So if your organisation is being bullied by someone who shouldn't bully it, or is corrupt, or is incompetent, it's time for you to resign, especially when it happens 6 times in a month.
Well, 6 times in a month and 13 times over the year. I mean, you know what these young men are going through, as I say, because you've gone through it yourself. You were accused of raping a 14-year-old girl, a pupil at the school where you taught, although not a pupil you had ever taught or indeed ever met. You were accused of raping her 3 times in a classroom. Now, there was some evidence that emerged in the court case, things like, proof that you weren't even in the school at the exact time or date that this accusation was made. That there were claims she made, for instance, that the door, you locked the door in the classroom and she couldn't escape, but it emerged afterwards that, well, there had been no locks on any of the doors in the school at that time. So much evidence that what she was saying was not true, and that she was a very troubled young woman, a woman you say in fact, she says that you'd never even met her. And yet it's devastated your life. What did it do to you as a very successful young man doing very well in your chosen career, in a successful relationship with a young baby? What did it do to you? And tell us what you think these young men are going through.
Well, what it is, in essence, is a complete and very effective deconstruction of the personality. It reduces you in terms of your career to 0, and the longer you've been working and the longer you've been promoted and achieving your career, the further you fall back down to 0. And by 0, I mean to the effect of a school leaver.
Yeah, I mean, you're not a teacher with lots of experience. You're the man who was accused of rape who was a teacher.
Yes,
that's becomes your identity.
Well, of course, there's no question of ever being able to teach again because no one would want you in their school.
And you've said since the case you wouldn't want to put yourself in a position where you could put yourself at such risk again.
No, it would be terrifying. But it does more than damage your career. It just dissolves your personality completely. You're on medication to wake you up, you're on medication to put you to sleep. You've lost complete control of your life for the year or 2 years that it takes for the investigation to conclude.
I mean, and this is the issue, isn't it? These young men, they like you, waited months, even years before their cases have come to court. And a lot of these, they're young men, their pictures go in the newspapers, they're named, they're photographed, everyone knows who they are. And of course, the women who've accused them, we're not talking about a he said, she said. We're talking about men who could not possibly have committed these rapes. The evidence is quite clear. The women, in some cases, the women have sent text messages saying, I really enjoyed sex with you last night. I mean, stuff that is so clear-cut that there could not have been a rape that took place. And yet these cases are coming to court and you get that. You know what the reaction is? People say, well, no smoke without fire.
Well, the really frustrating thing is that in all of these cases, it's the police who are hiding the evidence.
Yeah.
Every single time in all of these cases, including mine, the police have held in their hands the evidence that proved the defendant's
We're not talking
innocence.
about a lost telephone. We're talking about the police confiscating the telephone, having the mobile phone in their own sort of sealed plastic bags in their defence room, and not actually providing that evidence to the defence.
In some of the cases, yes, just refusing to hand over the phone with the messages or saying, as they did in one case, they don't know how to access messages on Facebook. But in my case, and this is, I'm sure, not the only example of this, the police had two witnesses, one who said she was in the room where the crime was supposed to have taken place at the time, and one who said she could place me in another room at the time. Now, the way the police managed to prosecute in spite of having that very obvious evidence for the innocence of the accused is they told those two witnesses, don't worry, you'll be able to say all this in court, but whatever you do, don't talk to the defence team. Then the day before the trial took place, the police said, we won't be calling you as witnesses, meaning that the two people who are going to turn up as witnesses in court to prove my innocence are very masterfully kept on hold, not talking to me for 2 years, and then dropped at the last minute.
And did you feel that that was in your case, and again in these other cases we've seen where the evidence is not handed over, and as you say, the police blame the CPS, CPS blame the police, that was deliberate, that did they think that you were a guilty man and it was vital that you went behind bars, or did they not care whether you were innocent and guilty, they just wanted you behind bars?
It's the latter, I'm afraid. It comes from a total lack of moral leadership at the top.
And that's Alison Saunders, the Director of Public
Well,
Prosecutions.
in the case of the CPS deciding when they haven't got the evidence to prosecute someone, yes. But the police are guilty of it too, Julia. Although you could say it's a question of incompetence of the lower levels of the police, what we've seen in my case is that a former very senior Metropolitan Police officer called Sue Akers was hired by my accuser's family to pressurise the police to ignore the evidence and continue with the investigation anyway, even when they knew that I was innocent because they had those witnesses in hand. Now, she was able to go right to the top, her old mates at the top of the police. There wasn't a single level or rank in the whole police that she didn't contact in order to get them to ignore the evidence.
She was acting on behalf of the parents, the mother of the girl who
Here's the point about leadership, Julia. This woman, Sue Akers, she lectures the Metropolitan Police on ethical policing. Now, when she was asked by the press, what was your involvement in this investigation, she lied. She lied to the public. She said, I wasn't involved at all, except right at the beginning, and they backed off completely.
Now, a lot of this has come out in subsequent cases because you have won compensation. I don't think it quite compensates for the years of your life that you've had damaged by a horrific false allegation of such. I mean, just basically the worst thing you can be accused of as a man. But you have won an unprecedented payout from the Crown Prosecution Service. What was that? So what was it for exactly?
The judge said to the Crown Prosecution Service, look, we have evidence here that the police were pressured wrongly to continue with the investigation, and you, the CPS, were pressured wrongly to prosecute him. So you need to explain to us, the court, why you chose to prosecute him when there was no evidence. And if you don't do that, we have to give him all his legal costs back. And the Crown Prosecution Service, tellingly, chose to pay me £181,000 of taxpayers' money to reimburse my legal costs rather than to reveal their reason. And they refused ever to explain why they did it. And they gave a reason why they wouldn't explain it. They said if they told the court why they had prosecuted me in the absence of evidence, it would undermine the public's faith in them to continue to do their job. Well, that's kind of an admission of guilt, isn't it?
But that's laughable, because what undermines our confidence in the Crown Prosecution Service and the police is them bringing cases. And crucially, as you say, I mean, it's not just the cost to pay these payouts, but also, I mean, your trial cost, I think, in police investigation, CPS, all of the trial time,
£1 million.
£1 million of taxpayers' money to try a man that the police and the CPS already knew was innocent, because they had the evidence to prove that you were innocent. But also, crucially, this not only fails men like you and these other 13 more innocent men who were put through this, it also suggests, with a level of chaos that suggests there will be guilty men who were getting off, who were not, because of this failure with evidence, but also the genuine women. The vast majority of rape claims are not lying. There's no evidence to think they are lying. But the vast majority of women who've genuinely been victims of this horrific crime, this is doing a disservice to them, isn't it?
High-profile acquittals. So you say there have been 13 in the recent past. There have been 6, including the Christmas break in the last 6 weeks. Yeah. They are failing the public. And, of course, the most important thing in our society's campaign to try and bring about justice for the many, many women who are real victims of sexual abuse, high-profile acquittals fail the public because they discourage victims from coming forward. That's before you even get on to the fact that you have 13 men here who are victims of crime, as I am. I am the victim of the crime.
False accusation, perverting the course of justice.
Perjury. So these accusers are criminals, but the CPS and the police refuse to recognise us as victims of crime. And if you read these recent cases in the newspapers, you'll see that even these women who have been found to have lied are still being referred to by the police and the CPS as victims.
When there's no evidence that any crime has taken place except the one they have perpetrated against these men. Just finally, Kato Harris, we started off by saying you believe that the Director of Public Prosecutions, the woman who runs the Crown Prosecution Service, given the number of cases where this has happened, given the fact that she will not accept any responsibility or launch an inquiry or any investigation into why these cases keep happening, where innocent men are put through this hell, why do you believe that Alison Saunders has to go?
Because she is either knowingly incompetent or knowingly corrupt. The point is, she says it's a resourcing matter. If only the CPS was better funded, then these things wouldn't happen. And the police say exactly the same thing. What they're actually saying is, give us some more money and maybe we won't hide the evidence next time. That's at best incompetent, but at worst morally wrong.
Kato Harris, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us again here at Talk Radio.